Hi, my name is Wendy Lampson, and I teach visual arts at Graham High School. Visual arts standards and objectives can be foreign to teachers, parents, and administration outside of the arts disciplines, and I want to share a glimpse into my classroom and how I approach teaching. Many of our art standards and objectives are intentionally vague to allow students to grow in areas based on their interests and passions. Beginning level classes tend to be more heavily based in technique and can be easier for observers to understand. But in more advanced courses, it may be harder for an onlooker to discern what's going on. Since many of our standards and objectives are designed for growth, the terminology mastering a standard doesn't fit the art disciplines very well. Most of our standards are not masterable. They are points of focus for growth, not something to be checked off when completed. Standards can be mapped out in pacing guides and revisited to determine if one has been more heavily hit than another. But projects and performances can be designed with multiple objectives in mind, and individual students can be focused on different areas of growth at different times. Many of our standards are long-term and meant to be revisited and intertwined throughout the course. Arts teachers generally know their standards and objectives so well that they can recognize an opportunity for growth in the middle of class and shift focus to a different standard when needed. These opportunities cannot always be planned. To give a concrete example of this, I'll share a scene from one of my classes last week. Students were working on an assigned project. The theme of the project was identity, and students could choose to create their project using a variety of art materials they had recently been introduced to and practiced using. In this unit, they first created a mind map to organize their thoughts and select an idea that they wanted to communicate in their artwork. Then, they completed an image development assignment where they described their plan, collected images for reference and inspiration, and explained how they would use art media to create their vision. Several state objectives were integrated at different stages of this process. In class, one of my students was stuck on his mind map. He'd already completed it, but was having trouble using it to generate ideas for an artwork. We had a conversation about what he thought makes up a person's identity. He tossed out some fairly standard thoughts: gender, age, ancestry. A couple of other students at the table suggested a few more: traditions, genetics, clothing style. After some discussion, he said, "What about social media?" I asked him to explain. He said, "My social media algorithm is built on what I like. Then I see more of that, and that continues to feed into my interests. It's a cycle." The discussion continued as students debated whether or not that was a positive thing. And after a while I said, "Okay, how do you communicate that with imagery? What images could you use as a symbol or metaphor for that?" One student suggested a washing machine. Another student said a hamster wheel. Gradually, more students walked over and engaged in the conversation, throwing out new ideas. At this point in time, most students were several steps ahead of this stage, already working on creating their own artwork, and they were happy to help a student that was stuck. At some point, a student suggested an hourglass, and the original student gravitated toward that. He said, "That's a good example. You keep flipping it over, and it keeps feeding back into the original sand, and all the sand is actually the same. You never add any new sand, it just goes back and forth." He started sketching an hourglass. His first composition was a large hourglass right in the middle of the page. I reminded him that the first idea is often not the most original and can sometimes be cliché. Then he sketched several hourglasses in different positions and said, "What if I try to make it look like it's moving? I can make one of them darker and the others can be faded to show the different positions represent different moments in time." Another student got excited and said, "You can do that with ghost prints." They had recently learned how to make relief prints. A ghost print is when you create something that's similar to a stamp, and if you use it multiple times after the original printing, there's less ink, and it produces a lighter, more faded print, a ghost print. I asked, how is the process of that media related to the concept? One of the students said, you continue the same action without adding any new ink to it. It's just like feeding back into your social media over and over again, but you're not really adding any new ideas or perspectives to it. They're all just copies of themselves. Within this one conversation, students demonstrated understanding of multiple objectives. And at this point of the project, the objective posted on the board was IV31, understand the function of tools in creating art, because most students were already creating their artwork. If an administrator walked in and saw the objective posted for the day, they may not understand the correlation. I also facilitate my class in a way that allows students to work at their own pace. So different students may be completing different tasks that have different objectives in mind. So when there's a requirement to post an objective on the board, arts teachers do their best to select one or two that most accurately reflect what we're doing in that planned lesson. But in actuality, we hit multiple objectives with different students throughout each class period, all at the same time. So when an observer walks into our classroom and asks where the posted objective is, it actually minimizes what we do. So much of our discipline involves creative and critical thinking and pushing students to be metacognitive about that process. They are all on such a wide spectrum in their abilities to do this, and it doesn't always make sense to target one objective at the same time for every student in the class. Many art teachers are truly excited about their learning design and the journeys of each of our students. We enjoy talking about it and sharing it with others. So when you visit, talk to us. Give us the opportunity to share the unique design we have in place and be open-minded if it doesn't fit the mold of teaching all students to one specific standard at the same time. Designing learning experiences that challenge students where they are is a problem that all teachers have, and there are a variety of methods that can be used to meet this need. In visual arts, I teach that there are multiple solutions to a problem, and it takes a curious and flexible mind to consider and test a variety of approaches to find the best one.